So, we're going to continue talking about prayer, and prayer is something that I think as Lutherans, we have an idea of what prayer should sound like, should look like, should feel like, and there are certain ways that we ought to do it, and certain ways that we ought not to do it, or at least certain ways that we find other people doing in other churches that look a little silly or a little strange to us. But in all actuality, there are lots of different ways to pray. There are lots of positions in which to pray. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today to give you an idea of the many types of prayer that there are. But we want to understand through Jesus' words and through the words of Paul in his letter to Timothy that prayer should be persistent. That's the word for today. Last week it was so-so about healing. Today it's about persistent prayer. Praying without ceasing. Going back and back and back to God. With the prayers, with the things that we need, the things that we want, the things that we hope for, the things that we are in dire and desperate need to happen in our lives. We need to go back and back and back to God over and over again. But prayer sometimes seems a little bit lofty to us. Prayer sometimes feels like we're not doing it right. We don't have the right words. We don't say it right, and so we don't want to do it in public. We don't want to do it in front of other people because it is so personal and so intimate. And that's okay. But prayer, as I've told the children, can be done anywhere, at any time, for any reason. It certainly can be done in school, it can be done in your work, it can be done in your neighborhoods, it can be done in your homes, and rightly so, it should be. It can be done in restaurants. It can be done anywhere that you feel the need to have a conversation with God. That's really all prayer is. It's a conversation between you and your Creator, the one who redeemed you, the one who sustains you, the one who loves you over and over again, to be with you over and over again. And so why wouldn't you pray and have a conversation with the one who knows you better than anyone else? You don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to have any kind of degree. You don't have to have gone to Sunday school for 15 years. You don't have to have gone to the right Bible study. Prayer is something that you can do wherever you are and in any situation. And there are certain positions that people put themselves in prayer. Some people do exactly like the children did. They fold their hands, they bow their heads, and they close their eyes. And they might pray something out loud, or they might pray something silently. But you have seen it in other churches, I'm sure. You've seen it on TV. You've seen it in videos. You may have seen people doing it here. But there are positions of your hands and places where your arms are lifted up. There are songs that we sing that talks about raising your arms and raising your hands. And so there are positions that we have that look like this, that look like this, and look like this. But they're always hands in different positions. Even if they're folded, they can be folded back this way. They can be in your pockets. You can have your arms folded. You can have your arms in any different position. You can have your eyes open. You can have one eye closed. You can have the other eye open. It doesn't matter the way you pray because it's a conversation between you and God. Prayer can happen during singing of songs. Prayer can happen during prayers that I pray up front. Prayer can happen, and you can have your arms lifted up if you so desire. Now, that's not the way most Lutherans do it, because Lutherans are a little bit funky in that way. We like to be reserved, and we like to show our piety, and we don't like to show how we are praying to God. But if you so desire, you go right ahead and pray the way you want to pray. But I asked you to do something with me today. I'm going to be sharing with you portions of a book by the author Henry Nouwen. How many people have ever heard of Henry Nouwen? Henry Nouwen is a very well-known pastor, but author, and he has worked at Notre Dame. He's worked at Yale. out of your hands. Don't put your hands, just make sure your feet are flat and steady. And you're sitting up, because you're going to need your hands. Now you can use one hand or you can use both hands. Doesn't matter. There's going to be a point where I ask you to do something, and if you feel like it, play along. If you don't, that's okay too. But I'm going to be reading portions of this book called With Open Hands. It is part of my library. If you want to read the whole thing, you're more than welcome to borrow this book. And people that are following along on Facebook, you're welcome to do these little exercises that we're going to be doing. So, let us begin. Praying is no easy matter. It demands a relationship in which you allow someone other than yourself to enter into the very center of your person, to see there what you would rather leave in darkness, and to touch there what you would rather leave untouched. Why would you really want to do that? Perhaps you would let the other cross your inner threshold to see something or to touch something, but to allow the other into that place where your most intimate life is shaped. That is dangerous and calls for defense. The resistance to praying is like the resistance of tightly clenched fists. This image shows a tension, a desire to cling tightly to yourself, a greediness which betrays fear. A story about an elderly woman brought to a psychiatric center exemplifies this attitude. She was wild, swinging at everything in sight, and frightening everyone so much that the doctors had to take everything away from her. But there was one small coin with which she gripped in her fist. It might have been a penny, it might have been a dime, but it was small, to be sure. And she would not give it up. In fact, it took two people to pry open that clenched hand. It was as if she would lose her very self along with the coin. So, imagine that you have a coin in your hand. Clench one or both hands as tightly as you can. Feel what is going on within that hand. You might feel your fingernails digging into your hand. You might feel the underpart of your fingers against the other part of your hand. You might feel very much your knuckles tightening up. You might feel a lot of tension in your hand. And that tension might go through the rest of your body then. If you hold it long enough, it takes that much more energy to hold on to it. But imagine this woman with the coin in her hand being forced to let go of it, and it took two people to try and wrench it out of her hand. She didn't want to let it go. If they deprived her of that last possession, she would have nothing more and be nothing more. That was her fear. She didn't want to give that up, and so she held on to that possession. And she clenched her fist. You can either clench your fist or you can relax it just a little bit. When you were invited to pray, you were asked to open your tightly clenched fist and give up your last hope. But who wants to do that? A first prayer, therefore, is often a painful prayer because you discover you don't want to let go. You hold fast to what is familiar, even if you aren't proud of it. You find yourself saying, that's just how it is with me. Or as we Lutherans would say, that's the way we've always done it. I would like it to be different, but it can't be now. That's just the way it is, and this is the way I'll have to leave it. Once you talk like that, you've already given up believing that your life might be otherwise. You've already let the hope for a new life float by. Since you wouldn't dare to put a question mark after a bit of your own experience with all its attachments, you have wrapped yourself up in the destiny of facts. You feel it's safer to cling to a sorry past than to trust in the new future. So you fill your hands with small, clammy coins, which you don't want to surrender. You still feel bitter because people weren't grateful for something you gave them. You still feel jealous of those who are better paid than you. You still want to take a revenge on someone who didn't respect you. You are still disappointed that you received no letter. Still angry because someone didn't smile when you walked by. You live through it. You live along with it as though it didn't really bother you until the moment when you want to pray. And then everything returns, and you clench that much harder. The bitterness, the hate, the jealousy, the disappointment, and the desire for revenge. But these feelings are not just there. You clutch them in your hands as if they were treasures you didn't want to let go. You sit wallowing in all that old sourness as if you couldn't do without it, as if in giving up you would lose your very self. Detachment is often understood as letting loose of what is attractive, but it sometimes also requires letting go of what is repulsive. You can indeed become attached to dark forces such as resentment and hatred. As long as you seek retaliation, you cling to your own past and you clench your fists even harder. Sometimes it seems as though you might lose yourself with your revenge and hate. So you stand there with balled up fists, closed to the other who wants to heal. When you want to pray then, the first question is, how do I open my closed hands? Certainly not by violence, nor by forced decision. Perhaps you can find your way to prayer by carefully listening to the words the angel spoke to Zechariah, to Mary, the shepherds, and the women at the tomb. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the one who wants to enter your most intimate space and invite you to let go of what you are clinging to so anxiously. Don't be afraid to show the clammy coin which will buy so little anyway. Don't be afraid to offer your hate, bitterness, and disappointment to the one who is love and only love. Even if you know you have little to show, don't be afraid to let it be seen. Often you will catch yourself wanting to receive your loving God by putting on a semblance of beauty, by holding back everything dirty and spoiled, by clearing just a little path that looks proper. But that is a fearful response, forced and artificial. Such a response exhausts you and turns your prayer into torment. Each time you dare to let go and to surrender one of these many fears, your hand opens a little, and your palms spread out in a gesture of receiving. You must be patient, of course, very patient, until your hands are completely open. So open your hands if they've been clenched this whole time. Feel what it feels like. Do exactly what I asked you to do before. How does it feel now that you have no clenching? Does it feel different? Does it feel like a weight has been lifted? It is a long spiritual journey of trust, for behind each fist another one is hiding. And sometimes the process seems endless. Much has happened in your life to make all those fists. And at any hour of the day or night, you might find yourself clenching your fists again out of fear. Maybe someone will say to you, you have to forgive yourself. But that is impossible. What is possible is to open your hands without fear, so that the one who loves you can blow your sins away. Then the coins you considered indispensable for your life prove to be little more than light dust, which a soft breeze will whirl away, leaving only a grin or a chuckle behind. Then you feel a bit of new freedom, and praying becomes a joy, a spontaneous reaction to the world and the people around you. Praying then becomes effortless, inspired and lively, or peaceful and quiet. When you recognize the festive and the still moments as moments of prayer, then you gradually realize that to pray is to live. That's prayer with open or with clenched fists. Throughout the rest of the book, the chapters go like this: prayer in silence, prayer in acceptance, prayer in hope, prayer in compassion, prayer in prophetic criticism, and then the conclusion, which we'll enter into now, with open hands. To pray means to open your hands before God. Try that now. Have one hand or both hands open throughout the rest of this reading. It means slowly relaxing the tension which squeezes your hands together and accepting your existence with an increasing readiness, not as a possession to defend, but as a gift to receive. Above all, prayer is a way of life which allows you to find a stillness in the midst of the world where you open your hands to God's promises and find hope for yourself, your neighbor, and your world. In prayer, you encounter God not only in the small voice and the soft breeze, but also in the midst of the turmoil of the world, in the distress and joy of your neighbor, and in the loneliness of your own heart. Prayer leads you to see new paths and to hear new melodies in the air. Prayer is the breath of your life, which gives you freedom to go and to stay where you wish and to find the many signs which point out the way to a new land. Praying is not simply some necessary compartment in the daily schedule of a Christian or a source of support in time of need, nor is it restricted to Sunday mornings or meal times. Praying is living. It is eating and drinking, action and rest, teaching and learning, playing and working. Praying pervades every aspect of our lives. It is the unceasing recognition that God is wherever we are, always inviting us to come closer and to celebrate the divine gift of being alive. In the end, a life of prayer is a life with open hands, where we are not ashamed of our weakness, but realize that it is more perfect for us to be led by the other than to try to hold everything in our own hands. Only within this kind of life does a spoken prayer make sense. A prayer in church, at a table, and in school is only a witness to what we want to make our entire lives. Such a prayer reminds us that praying is living, and it invites us to make this an ever greater reality. Thus, there are as many ways to pray as there are moments in life. Sometimes we seek out a quiet spot and we want to be alone. Sometimes we look for a friend and want to be together. Sometimes we look or we like a book. Sometimes we prefer music. Sometimes we want to sing out with hundreds. Sometimes only a whisper with a few. Sometimes we wanted to sing with birds. Sometimes with a deep silence. In all these moments, we gradually make our lives more of a prayer, and we open our hands to be led by God, even to places we would rather not go. Prayer is living. Prayer is opening up and helping God to give us gifts, allowing us the opportunity to receive. It is the same posture that we have when we receive the gift of Holy Communion. It is the same posture we have when anyone gives us a gift. It is the same posture that we have when we want to serve. How can I help you? It is the same posture that opens up opportunities for mutual respect and mutual understandings. Open hands in prayer is a way to be open to God in every single aspect of our lives. If all we're going to do is clench our hands, and all we're going to do is raise our fists to God, and all we're going to be is angry with the world, that kind of prayer will only lead to more anger, more fear, more hatred. But with open hands, hands that are wide open, hands that are clasped very tightly, hands that are up in the air, praising God, are open to God's love, open to God's mercy, open to God's grace. And so prayer, while it is very, very intimate, very personal, there is no way that it is right or wrong, the right words or the right way of doing it. All we have to remember is to do it persistently, over and over again, coming back to God with the things that are on our hearts the most. Praying for ourselves, praying for others, praying for people with cancer, praying for people that are homeless, praying for people that have no food, praying for people that are taken away from their lives because of dementia or other kinds of illnesses. But pray and have conversation with with open hands, ready to offer ourselves, and at the same time ready to receive. There is one final prayer that he offers. And with whatever position that you want to offer, pray with me. Dear God, I do not know where you are leading me. I do not even know what my next day, my next week, or my next year will look like. As I try to keep my hands open, I trust that you will put your hand in mine and bring me home. Thank you